Hi, my name is Brooklyn, and I'm 29 years old. If there's one truth I've learned in life, it's this. Not all bruises are visible. Some of the deepest wounds are made by silence, by neglect, by growing up in a house where you're seen, but never truly noticed. That was my reality. I was born the second child to Oscar and Sandra, my parents by blood, but rarely by affection. My older brother Martin was the son they all orbited around. He didn't have to earn it. He didn't have to prove anything. The moment he opened his eyes in this world, they gave him theirs. Growing up, it was Martin who got praised at every parent-teacher meeting, who got cake for a B grade while I was scolded for anything less than perfection. If I brought home a school certificate, it was met with a forced smile. If Martin scored a goal in soccer, Dad practically threw a party. At some point, I stopped bringing them my good news. I stopped seeking their approval because I learned early on I wasn't the child they wanted to show off. Holidays were the worst. Martin got the latest gadgets, new shoes, and gym memberships. I got journals, cheap sweaters, and the same phrase every year. We know how much you love simple things. It wasn't the gifts that hurt, it was the effort. The constant reminder that I was the afterthought. The only person who ever made me feel like I belonged was my grandmother, Jennifer. She lived in a charming brick house 2 towns away. Her hands were always busy, baking, folding laundry, tending the garden, but she never seemed too busy to sit with me. Whether I was 5 or 25, she made me feel like I mattered. With her, there were no comparisons. No forced smiles. Just truth, kindness, and the warmth I longed for. She used to hold my hand across the teacup and say, "Brooklyn, you are not invisible. Not to me. One day, they'll realize what they threw away." I held on to those words for years. Every time Martin got praised for doing the bare minimum, and I was blamed for things I didn't do. Every time Mom ignored me in public to brag about Martin's fake business ventures. Every time Dad told me to stop seeking attention when I was only trying to be heard, I thought of Grandma's voice. But hope is a fragile thing when you're surrounded by people who treat you like you're in the way. I spent most of my teens and early adulthood learning how to shrink myself just enough to avoid conflict, but never enough to stop hurting. I helped with Martin's engagement. I offered to run errands for the wedding. I stayed quiet when Mom gave me a used dress to wear as a bridesmaid while buying Vanessa, my future sister-in-law, a designer gown just for photos. I did it all, not because I was weak, but because I still believed that if I was good enough, kind enough, helpful enough, maybe one day they'd love me too. I was wrong, because what I didn't know was that they were planning something far worse than just ignoring me. They were planning to erase me completely. And it all started with a lie. A lie so loud, so carefully planted, that it would nearly destroy me. But not before it exposed every dark corner of the truth they tried to hide. It happened on a rainy Sunday afternoon. One of those quiet, gray days that pull memories out of you like threads. I had just finished helping Jennifer plant lavender in her backyard garden when she called me inside for tea. The kettle hissed on the stove, and the air smelled like honey and fresh earth. Everything about her home made me feel calm, safe, seen. As we sat down at the small round table near her window, she reached into the side drawer and pulled out a large envelope. I assumed it was old letters or recipes. But when she placed it in front of me, her expression was serious. "I've been meaning to show you this for a while, Brooklyn," she said gently. "It's time." Inside were official documents, property deeds, bank records, and a draft of her last will and testament. I slowly flipped through them, my fingers shaking slightly as I began to understand what I was looking at. The house. Her savings. A sizable stock portfolio. Jewelry passed down through generations. In total, it was worth around $4 million. And every single part of it was being left to me. My eyes welled with tears. "Grandma, why me?" She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "Because you've lived your whole life earning what they took for granted. I watched how they treated you. How they elevated Martin while making you feel small. You never lashed out. You never gave up. You've got a strength they'll never understand." I didn't know what to say. For once, I was speechless. She could have split the estate, given it all to Martin to avoid drama, but she chose me. Not because I asked, not because I demanded, but because I had simply endured. She made it clear she hadn't told anyone yet, not even my parents. But I'm sure they'll sense it soon enough, she said with a sigh. Martin, especially. That boy's got jealousy in his bones. And, oh, was she right? It was subtle at first. Martin stopped replying to my texts. If I showed up at a family event, he made jokes that felt more like jabs. Careful, everyone. Brooklyn's probably here to take notes for her future estate. Or, must be nice knowing Grandma's your personal aide. He didn't know anything for sure, but he suspected. And that suspicion turned into poison. Mom started making comments about how some people were always trying to manipulate the elderly. Dad would chuckle and say, "Can't wait to see who's really loyal when the will gets read." They thought they were being subtle. They weren't. Jennifer kept reassuring me. Let them talk. When people don't have your piece, they'll attack your name instead. But it wasn't just words. Martin was planning something. Something ugly. Something that would take everything I loved and twist it into a weapon. And he'd strike when I least expected it. His wedding day. The day of Martin's wedding arrived with perfect weather and fake smiles. The venue was as extravagant as you'd expect. An expensive lakefront estate adorned with white orchids, crystal chandeliers, and an aisle long enough to host a fashion runway. Every detail screamed, "Look at me," which, honestly, suited my brother perfectly. I wore a soft blue dress my grandmother had gifted me. Not flashy, not cheap, just tasteful. I helped where I could, arranging flowers, calming Vanessa's nerves, organizing the seating chart when the planner forgot the copy. I didn't do it for Martin or my parents. I did it for Vanessa. She was always kind to me, and though she wasn't particularly close, she had never treated me like I didn't belong. Still, I could feel the tension when I arrived. My parents barely acknowledged me. Sandra gave me a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oscar avoided me altogether. Martin looked through me like I was just another guest, not his sister, not someone who had worked behind the scenes to make the event smoother. Jennifer wasn't in the main crowd. She had a reserved seat near the front, quiet and composed, like always. I glanced at her a few times during the ceremony. She nodded slightly each time, her eyes warm with reassurance. The ceremony itself was beautiful, of course. Martin and Vanessa exchanged vows under an arch of white roses, and everyone clapped. For a moment, it felt like peace had visited, even if briefly. But peace doesn't last in a house built on resentment. Later, during the reception, the DJ faded the music for the speeches. One by one, people toasted the couple. The best man cracked jokes. Vanessa's maid of honor told a sweet story, and then Martin stepped up to the microphone. I knew something was wrong the second he started talking. He wasn't smiling. His voice trembled, not with emotion, but with tightly controlled rage. "There's something I need to say," he began, scanning the crowd. "It's not easy, but I can't stand here on the most important day of my life and pretend everything is fine." The room went still. Even the servers froze in place. "I found out this morning," he continued, "that someone very close to me, someone I trusted, stole $150,000 from us. Our honeymoon fund. It's gone." A gasp moved through the crowd like a ripple across water. And then he said it. It was my sister, Brooklyn. My blood ran cold. My stomach dropped. There was a moment, just one, where I thought he was joking. That this was some kind of messed up attempt at humor. But his expression? Ice cold. I stood there in complete shock. "What are you talking about?" He turned to me in front of everyone. "Don't play dumb. You had access to the documents. You helped with the planning. You knew exactly where the payments were scheduled." "That's not true," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't touch anything. I didn't even know where that money was kept." Vanessa looked confused, her eyes darting between us. She hadn't expected this. No one had. Then Sandra stood up from her table, her voice shrill. "How could you, Brooklyn? At your own brother's wedding? You've embarrassed us enough." Oscar's jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists. I could feel something dark building inside him. Something far more dangerous than words. Martin wasn't just angry. He was acting. He had rehearsed this. He wanted the world to see me as a criminal. And in that moment, no one, not even I, could have guessed how far my father was about to take it. I barely had time to react. My heart pounded so hard, I could feel it in my throat. All eyes were on me, and every second felt like a spotlight burning into my skin. Then it happened. Oscar, my father, stood up so fast his chair screeched across the floor. His face was flushed red, eyes wild with fury. Without saying a word, he marched across the hall like a man possessed. The wedding photographer, who had just finished capturing the last group photo, stood near the front with his DSLR camera mounted on a professional gimbal. Oscar stormed straight toward him. "Hey, sir, please don't touch that," the photographer called, confused. But it was too late. Oscar ripped the camera off the gimbal with both hands, yanked the device out of its stabilizing grip, and then, still gripping it by the gimbal like a club, turned around and stormed straight toward me. I didn't even move. I couldn't. My body froze in disbelief. All I managed was a whispered, "Dad?" And then he swung. The heavy camera, still attached to its base, smashed into the side of my forehead with a force so hard it felt like thunder exploded in my skull. I dropped instantly, falling sideways against a table. Glass shattered. Plates crashed to the floor. Someone screamed. The pain came in waves, sharp and blinding. My head throbbed, blood streamed down my temple, and my ears rang like a fire alarm. I could barely open my eyes. I tasted metal in my mouth. Guests gasped, some covered their mouths. Others stepped back in horror. And through the ringing in my ears, I heard Sandra's voice, clear, loud, venomous. She deserved it. She's a liar and a thief. I raised a monster. No one came to my defense. No one except one. Enough. It was Jennifer. She pushed through the crowd with the kind of strength only a furious grandmother can carry. Her eyes weren't teary. They were blazing. She dropped to her knees beside me and shouted, "Call 911. Right now." When no one moved fast enough, she pulled out her phone and did it herself. Her voice to the dispatcher was like steel. "My granddaughter has been assaulted at a wedding in front of 200 witnesses. Head trauma. There's blood. I need an ambulance and the police immediately. 3 individuals are involved in the attack: her father, her mother, and her brother. And I will testify against all of them." I was drifting in and out of consciousness, but I remember gripping her hand. Her fingers were strong. Steady. Paramedics and police arrived within minutes. The flashing red and blue lights lit up the wedding hall like a crime scene, and that's exactly what it had become. As I was loaded onto the stretcher, I saw Martin, Sandra, and Oscar being surrounded by officers. But before anyone could be taken away, something incredible happened. Jennifer, my grandmother, my rock, walked up to the microphone at the front of the room. She cleared her throat. The guests, stunned into silence, turned to face her. She raised her hand and said, her voice powerful and unwavering, "Before these 3 are taken away, I have something to say, and I want every person here to hear it." The room went dead silent. You could hear the humming of the lights, the soft static of the microphone in Jennifer's hand, and the distant sirens still fading in the background. All eyes were now on her, this dignified woman in a lavender dress, standing like a judge in a courtroom made of flowers and shame. She stood beside the officers who were preparing to escort Oscar, Sandra, and Martin out in handcuffs. None of them looked at her. They couldn't. Jennifer took a long breath and said, "This young woman, my granddaughter, Brooklyn, has endured a lifetime of neglect, verbal abuse, and now physical assault. Not from strangers, but from the very people who were supposed to love her most." There were murmurs in the crowd. Some guests nodded slowly. Others just stared, wide-eyed. Let me be clear. My entire estate, every home, account, investment, and heirloom totaling $4 million has been legally designated to Brooklyn. That decision was mine, and mine alone. Not because she begged for it. Not because she manipulated me. But because she has proven herself worthy of my trust and my legacy. Vanessa, standing at the edge of the crowd, brought her hand to her mouth. Her eyes welled with tears, not just from shock, but understanding. "These three," Jennifer said, turning toward Oscar, Sandra, and Martin, "have not only shamed themselves, they've attempted to destroy someone out of pure greed and resentment. And I will be pressing full criminal charges against each of them. They don't just deserve to be taken away today, they deserve to be remembered for what they really are: cruel, cowardly, and dangerous." A murmur of agreement swept through the guests. Some clapped softly. Others cried. The officers nodded to Jennifer respectfully, then proceeded to escort the three of them, now completely stripped of their fake superiority, toward the exit. Just then, Vanessa stepped forward. Everyone turned as she approached Martin, whose wrists were already bound behind his back. Her heels clicked sharply across the hardwood floor. Her face was blank, expressionless. Cold. She didn't say a word. Instead, she took off her diamond engagement ring, extended her hand, and dropped it at his feet. Clink. It bounced once and settled against the base of his dress shoes. "We're done," she said quietly. "For good." Her parents, visibly angry and ashamed, turned their backs on Martin and walked out with her. Martin didn't respond. He couldn't. His face was red, twisted in confusion and disbelief, as though he couldn't process the fact that his lies had collapsed in public. As the police escorted them outside, the room remained hushed. Jennifer turned away from the microphone and rushed to my side as the paramedics secured my stretcher. "I'm going with her," she told the EMTs. "Don't even think of stopping me." They didn't. The doors opened, and the sound of camera shutters and murmuring press echoed from outside. But I didn't hear it anymore. I just felt the tight grip of my grandmother's hand in mine as we rode away in the ambulance. And for the first time in my life, I felt something powerful. Not fear. Not shame. Justice, finally waking up. The ambulance pulled away from the venue, but behind us, the wedding was crumbling into dust. What was supposed to be a picture-perfect celebration had turned into a scandal of epic proportions. The venue staff began tearing down decorations. Guests stood outside in small circles, whispering in shock, checking their phones for updates. Some were calling ride-shares, others just left in silence. But one thing was clear: the wedding was over. No dancing, no cake, no first dance. Just handcuffs and humiliation. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics cleaned the blood off my forehead as gently as they could. One of them kept his voice low as he said, "You're lucky. That camera hit hard. It could have fractured your skull." I nodded weakly, still dazed, not just from the pain, but from the sheer chaos of it all. Jennifer sat beside me, holding my hand the entire time. She didn't cry. She didn't fumble with her words. She was just steady, strong, like the roots of an oak tree refusing to snap in the storm. At the hospital, I was rushed into observation. The ER team cleaned the gash on my forehead, applied stitches, and ran a CT scan to rule out internal bleeding. Thankfully, the results came back clear: no permanent damage, though they warned me of potential migraines and bruising for days. Meanwhile, Jennifer stepped out to take phone calls. By the time she returned, she had already spoken to a legal representative, booked a meeting with attorney Mark Wilson, and arranged for a police statement to be taken while I rested. "You don't have to worry," she said as she returned to my bedside. "I'm handling it. You just focus on healing." But I wasn't done. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles and hearing the beep of monitors, I made up my mind. I wasn't just going to heal quietly. I was going to fight, not just for what they did at the wedding, but for every birthday they ignored, every lie they spread, every insult they dressed up as advice. That night, after the nurses dimmed the lights and Jennifer curled up on the guest chair, I opened my phone and began writing everything down. The events, the pain, the proof. Because tomorrow, we were going to war. And this time, I had the truth on my side. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds of my hospital room, soft and golden, like it had no idea the world had fallen apart the night before. My head ached, the stitches still fresh above my temple, but the pain no longer clouded my judgment. It sharpened it. I didn't feel broken. I felt alive, alert, ready. Jennifer was already dressed and standing by the window, phone in one hand, reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. She had been up early, making calls, organizing the next steps like a general preparing for battle. "You have an appointment at 2 p.m., she said calmly, tucking her phone into her purse. "Mark Wilson, best attorney in the state. Knows exactly how to handle people who think they're untouchable." I pushed myself to sit upright. "We're filing everything?" She nodded.
Every
"Single thing." By afternoon, I was seated across from Mark Wilson, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s with a kind of confidence that didn't need to raise its voice. His office was lined with law books and framed court victory headlines. But what reassured me most was the way he listened, not just to respond but to understand. I walked him through every detail, from the years of neglect to the whispered comments to the physical assault in front of over 200 people. Jennifer supported my account with names, dates, even printed messages she had quietly documented over the years. Then I handed him the USB drive. Inside it was everything. Video recordings from the wedding guests, cell phone clips of Oscar swinging the camera, audio of Sandra calling me a thief, Jennifer's speech at the microphone, Vanessa dropping the engagement ring at Martin's feet, and multiple screenshots of Martin's previous texts trying to intimidate me into staying away from Grandma's legal affairs. Mark reviewed it all in silence. When he finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "This isn't just a family issue. This is criminal assault, defamation, and malicious intent to obstruct inheritance. We can press charges on all three, Oscar, Sandra, and Martin." I nodded. "And I want it public. I'm not hiding anymore." "Good," he said, "because we'll be filing both criminal and civil suits, one for justice, the other for damages. And believe me, the court will take this seriously. They had money, power, and witnesses, and still chose violence." Jennifer pulled out her file folder, organized, stapled, tabbed. "Here's a copy of my will, notarized and predated. It clearly names Brooklyn as sole inheritor of my $4 million estate. They knew this was coming, and they tried to destroy her before it could happen. Then we'll make sure they regret trying," Mark said with quiet finality. That evening, I signed every document. Assault reports, legal authorizations, official affidavits. I gave my full video statement to the police and even authorized hospital staff to release my medical report as supporting evidence. I wasn't just a daughter or a sister anymore. I was a plaintiff, a survivor. And for the first time in my life, I had power they couldn't take away. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and old wood, cold, formal, and far too quiet. But the moment I stepped through its doors, escorted by Jennifer and attorney Mark Wilson, it felt like I was walking into something far more sacred than a building. This was where the lies would finally die, where the whispers would be replaced by evidence, where the truth would stop apologizing. Oscar, Sandra, and Martin sat at the defendant's table in formal clothes that looked uncomfortable on them. Their expressions were stiff, like they were still trying to cling to some illusion of dignity. But their eyes told the real story.
fear, guilt,
Anger. My side of the room was different. Jennifer sat behind me, hands folded neatly in her lap, her chin raised. Mark stood to my left, files organized, laptop open, confident and calm. I took a slow breath and remembered the hospital monitors, the sting of stitches, the sound of my father's rage crashing into my skull. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. The trial opened with the prosecution playing the wedding footage on the big screen. A room that had once been filled with cheers and celebration was now filled with gasps and shocked silence. The moment Oscar hit me with the DSLR camera, a few jurors visibly flinched. When Sandra shouted, "She deserves it," in the background, a woman in the gallery audibly whispered, "My God." And then came Jennifer's speech. "Every last dollar of my estate, $4 million, is being legally transferred to Brooklyn." The courtroom shifted as if it had just learned the real motive behind everything. Next came the medical records. The attending doctor testified via Zoom, explaining the depth of the head trauma, the swelling, the risk I had faced. And then came Vanessa. She walked into the courtroom like a storm wrapped in silk.
Calm.
Composed. Her testimony cut straight through every layer of Martin's lies. There had never been any honeymoon fund. Martin had invented the story the night before the wedding, after a suspicious phone call with Sandra. He admitted to her that he was going to make Brooklyn pay and ruin her in front of everyone. He told me, she said, looking straight at the jury, that if he could make her look like a thief, Grandma might change the will. Mark let that statement hang in the air for a moment. It was like pulling a pin from a grenade and placing it in the middle of the room. Then came Jennifer's testimony, calm, firm, and razor-sharp. She told the court how she had watched Brooklyn suffer quietly for years, how she had chosen her as her inheritor because of her strength and integrity. She made it clear this attack wasn't an accident. It was the final act of a long pattern of abuse. Finally, I stood. I told the jury about my childhood, about the way Oscar and Sandra always made Martin the center of the universe, how I became an afterthought in my own home. I described the wedding moment by moment, how it felt to be attacked not just physically, but publicly, as if my life didn't matter to them at all. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I came here because if I let them silence me again, then I'll never be free. And I will not live a quiet life to protect the reputation of the people who broke me. When I sat down, the silence in the room felt heavier than stone. The defense tried to paint it all as a family misunderstanding. But the jury wasn't buying it. The video, the audio, the text messages, the witness statements, they couldn't be denied. The verdict came in that same afternoon.
Guilty.
Oscar was sentenced to 3 years in prison for aggravated assault. Sandra received 18 months for complicity and emotional abuse. Martin, the mastermind, was sentenced to 2 years for defamation, false accusation, and malicious intent to obstruct inheritance. The judge's final statement was etched in my memory. This court does not tolerate violence masquerading as family loyalty. The law is not a shield for favoritism or abuse. As the bailiffs led them away, I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in a long, long time, it felt like justice wasn't a fantasy. The courtroom was behind me, but the freedom it gave me followed everywhere. A week after the trial, I sat with Jennifer in her home, our safe haven, at the same table where she had first handed me that envelope of legal papers months ago. This time, there were no warnings, no shadows of what might come. This time, there was just peace. She pulled out a thick folder of documents, placed a gold pen beside it, and said softly, "This is the final transfer. The house, the accounts, the assets, everything is yours now, Brooklyn. It's done." I swallowed hard. Not because I wasn't ready, but because for the first time, someone had trusted me enough to give me everything without expecting me to be anything else but myself. I signed the paperwork slowly, deliberately. When I was done, Jennifer reached over, rested her hand on mine, and whispered, "You've turned pain into power, my girl. Now, do something with it." And I did. I didn't use the inheritance to move to a mansion in the hills or take a vacation in the Caribbean.
No.
I used it to build something lasting. With a portion of the money, I founded a nonprofit called the Haven Project, a center dedicated to helping women and young adults who had suffered emotional abuse, family neglect, or unjust accusations.
People like me.
People who needed a place to feel safe, to be heard, to recover without being silenced. We offered a legal aid for survivors of domestic or psychological abuse, emergency housing for those fleeing toxic family environments, mental health counseling, financial planning workshops, and most importantly, community. Jennifer became our honorary co-founder and counselor. She refused to retire. Every morning, she showed up at the office in her neatly pressed blouse and pearls, bringing fresh tea and firm advice. Everyone called her Grandma J. And everyone adored her. We grew fast. Within 6 months, our center was serving over 100 families. Not a week went by without someone saying, "I thought I was the only one." Each time, I told them what Jennifer told me. "You're not invisible. Not anymore." I poured my energy into that place because I wasn't just healing myself. I was helping others reclaim their voice before it got buried in guilt or shame. My parents? Still in prison serving their terms. Martin? He tried to appeal his sentence but failed. I'd heard he moved to another state after release, and last I checked, he was struggling to hold down a job. I didn't wish him pain. But I also didn't forgive him. Vanessa? She came to visit me once. We had coffee. She apologized. I told her she never owed me one. She had believed in Martin, and I didn't blame her for that. We parted on good terms. As for Jennifer and me, we continued to grow the Haven Project together, laughing over old memories, smiling at the new stories we were helping shape. Because when you've been through hell and survived, there's no greater peace than giving someone else a map to climb out to. It's funny how life can feel like a storm for so long that when calm finally arrives, you don't know what to do with it. Some nights, I sit on the porch of the Haven Project after everyone's gone home. I sip chamomile tea from my grandmother's favorite porcelain mug and watch the lights flicker across the garden beds we built together. Lavender, daisies, sunflowers, flowers that refuse to wilt, even in harsh soil. Much like me, I often think about how close I came to being erased, not just from the family story, but from my own identity. How easily a lie can catch fire when it's spoken by the people you once trusted most. A brother's jealousy, a mother's blind cruelty, a father's violence, a room full of people ready to believe the worst about a woman who never did them wrong.
But now,
I don't live in that story anymore. I live in a different chapter. One where the people who broke me were exposed under courtroom lights. One where justice replaced silence and truth outshouted tradition. One where the woman everyone tried to erase became the author of her own legacy. Do the scars still ache? Sometimes. Do the memories still sting? Yes. But they no longer define me. Now, I'm defined by the women who walk through our doors every week, carrying fear, carrying shame, but leaving with dignity. I'm defined by the hand Jennifer holds every time she says, "You are enough." And sometimes I think back to that moment in the hospital, broken, bruised, humiliated, and I imagine whispering to that version of myself, "Just hold on. They don't get to write your ending." Because I've written it now. My name is Brooklyn, and I am no longer the forgotten daughter, the scapegoat sister, or the girl they tried to silence. I am a survivor, a leader, a builder of safe places. And the people who thought they could destroy me, they only helped me realize just how unbreakable I truly am. If this story moved you or made you think twice about the power of truth and justice, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life stories every week. Your support helps us continue telling voices that deserve to be heard. Thanks for watching, and always remember, the truth never stays buried for long.